everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and I'm here to review all the latest films in theaters, as well as anything as you guys recommend, whether they be recent films or old school movies. Now, before we go into today's video, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel, as well as following us on all of the social outlets you see below. Now, today's is going to be a review of a movie that came out back in October, but it is up for award recognition, and that is First Man. Now, this movie is directed by Damien Chazelle. Many people might know his previous directorial films, such as La La Land and one of my personal favorites, Whiplash. The film overall, I mean, we've seen space movies before. I mean, such as like Apollo 13, all the right stuff, and stuff like that. But this one is going to be more about Neil Armstrong in itself. And I mean, this movie came out, and a lot of people were just, huge, like, this is gonna be a huge rewards film, stuff like that. Ryan Gosling's gonna, knock it out of the park, and this is gonna look amazing and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it had a lot riding on it in terms of pressure to perform. But yeah, I mean, that's what the general plot of this movie is as well. Is this movie is not only about the moon landing, because that's actually the end of the film right there. It's more or less the 8-year journey of Neil Armstrong through NASA and the many failed attempts and basically tries that it took for them to finally achieve their goal to get on the moon, and just kind of the toll it takes on Neil Armstrong and his friends and family. And that's the general plot of the film. So if you're expecting the entire movie to be just about the moon landing, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because the moon landing only is probably about 15 minutes of the film. What actually worked for the film overall is, for the most part, all the performances are really good. Standout for me would be Claire Foy as Janet Armstrong, who plays Neil's wife. I think Claire Foy does a fantastic job in the film. She does a good job of performing that wife role of, she's a supportive wife, she loves her husband, but through the years that they go, you can kind of see the strain it's starting to have on their marriage, and the stress is not only that she has to go through, because I mean, yeah, while Neil is going up into space, she's the one that's sitting at home taking care of the kids, and having to basically listen on this little box about what's going on, even as things go bad. She literally has no control of what's happening to her in her life at that moment, and Claire Foy does a fantastic job of displaying that in this movie. Other standout performances, Jason Clarke as Ed White, I thought was a great job of supporting. I wish they would have given him more to do, but obviously his character is there to support Ryan Gosling's Neil Armstrong character. But I love Jason Clarke's character role in this film overall. Ryan Gosling does a solid job as Neil Armstrong. Do I feel that he probably could have done a little bit more with the role to kind of just hit that upper echelon that Gosling hits? Of course, but he was solid in the role himself, but it's definitely not one of his best performances. There are certain scenes where he does kind of break out and do some great things, but for the most part, he's just stoically looking off in the distance, and it definitely just wasn't one of my favorite Ryan Gosling performances overall. You also have Kyle Chandler. He does a great job as Deke Slayton. You also have Olivia Hamilton. She plays Ed White's wife, Pat. I thought she was real solid in her small role. Like I said, the performances all around, except for one, which I'll get to, I thought did a really good job overall. Now, the big part of this film that really works is definitely the space scenes. They are super intense. They are incredibly stressful in a way, because the way Chazelle shot this is it makes you feel like you are in that spacecraft with Neil the entire time, and the sound design of this movie is incredible as you hear all the cranks and the nooks and the bangs inside, where for the astronauts themselves can be quite terrifying, because you're hearing all these bangs and kind of sounds, and you're just at the mercy of it. You're just sitting there, and you can't fix it. You can't take care of it. And they do a great job of giving you almost that claustrophobic feeling while you're in the shuttles with Neil and Ed White and Buzz Aldrin and all these guys. And it's incredibly intense, and they're the highlight of the film. They're definitely, especially the opening scene. The opening scene is Neil in an aircraft carrier, and it is such an intense scene overall. And there's many scenes like this throughout the film, especially the moon landing. Every space scene is done beautifully throughout, whether it's the sound design, the visuals, or just all of it as a whole. They do an incredible job of that overall, and that is the highlight and the real reason to see this film is just how Chazelle shot this movie overall. Also, I also really like how much went into this process. I mean, Apollo 13 or even Armageddon to an extent, and we do get to see kind of the process that they go into, like, to get them to this one mission, and usually it's a montage and stuff like that. This movie is a lot of it them going through the actual process of figuring out how to land on the moon and the trials and errors and tests that they have to go through. And that's something that a lot of movies don't do nowadays because they realize that people just want to see the space stuff and not like most people want to eat the cake, they don't want to see how the cake is made. If you want to use an example. And this movie shows you all the ingredients, shows you the recipes, and shows you how they made the cake before you actually get to eat it. And I actually really enjoyed that. And because the movie does go over a course of 8 years, and you get to see everything that happens in the 8 years. And there's a ton of loss in this film as well. There are a lot of people. I mean, this is not really spoilers. I mean, you could look this up on Wikipedia or anything. There's a ton of loss in this movie. And basically, there are certain parts of that I wish they could have delved into more. But obviously, they had to get the story moved along because they had to get to basically 1969 and the moon landing. But I really liked how much they went into the actual process of getting on the moon instead of just automatically just going boom, boom, they're on the moon. So all that stuff really worked for me. Now, what doesn't work in the film, like I said, Ryan Gosling's performance is not nearly as strong. He gives a solid performance, but there are just certain scenes that I wished he could have done just a little bit better. Now, while I did say I did like the process of the film overall, of them, like the process of how they got to the moon, there are certain points in the film where it does drag. So for people who aren't ready for that, they might get bored at certain points of the film because there are certain times where it's just like, okay, let's keep going. There's also certain parts, like I said, of loss in the film that I feel like they just kind of gloss over certain characters. There's just certain characters in the film that we spent so much time with that once a certain character is taken out of the film, that they just kind of not bring those characters back in anymore, which I thought kind of sucked because a lot of those characters I actually quite enjoyed. And as soon as a certain character passes in the film, they just kind of throw that character off by the wayside. And I get that. I mean, it's part of the story, but they were just so good in their scenes that I wish that we could have delved more into the characters outside of just that particular character, just to get a little bit more meat on the bone. The big thing that I have a huge problem with is that they make Buzz Aldrin come off like a complete dick in this movie. He's played by Corey Stoll, who I love as an actor, but they just make him come off like this buffooned asshole the entire way, and it's very unpleasing because it's just like this guy can't be that dumb. Not dumb and like he's not smart, but just like he has no filter, and he doesn't think before he says things, and it just makes the character really unlikable. And I'm sorry, that's probably not the way you want to perceive Buzz Aldrin, who's one of America's heroes, as being the second guy on the moon, to just make him come off like a complete D-bag the entire film. So that was something they probably could have done a little bit better. Also, the whole race with the Russians to get to space, they have like literally one scene or two that kind of explains that, but I wish they could have delved more deeper into that, because that's why we were doing what we were doing, and why we were spending so much money, and why, even though we were losing people, we just kept going because we were trying to beat the Russians. And I wish they could have gone a little bit further into that story element, but they don't. And even though a lot of people enjoyed them, I could not stand the children who played Neil Armstrong's kids. I was not a fan of their performances. The older child, he just goes into this different mood as a character halfway through the film, and there's no real explanation or scenes that show his character change. And then, of course, the younger child, he's playing a younger kid, so, I mean, he's just annoying in general. But I just wasn't a big fan of the child actors in this film. Overall thoughts, though, of the movie, I thought it was an incredibly solid film. Definitely a highlight in terms of space exploration and just the process that goes into the film. And like I said, the performances overall are very well done. And yes, while this is not better than La La Land or Whiplash, Damien Chazelle still does a fantastic directing job in this. I don't think it deserves all the awards it's getting right now. I do think Claire Foy definitely deserves a supporting actress nomination, and I do think the sound design in this film definitely deserves some recognition as well. But it's a solid film overall. It's not going to be for everybody. If you're not a fan of space or the process of getting into space, or history in general, then this is not the film for you. If you like those things, then I feel like you're going to really enjoy this film, even though there are certain things, like I said, that they should have delved more into, or some things that they just dropped and didn't go back to. But overall, if you like space, or if you want to learn about the moon landing and all that stuff, then this is something that I highly recommend, that I think you guys will enjoy. And if not, then maybe you're just a Ryan Gosling fan and you want to see Ryan Gosling. But if that's the case, you're probably not going to enjoy him as much in this movie as you do in other films. Well, that's the review. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you feel like this review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as well as all the social media outlets you see below. And until next time, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.